Yes! Woo! The victory horns are sounding and they ring for Brandon Royval. That is right. UFC Mexico City is in the books. And it's not a new champion, but there is a new king of the Brandons. Brandon Royval takes a split decision win over Brandon Moreno. And we're here to talk about all of it. We're here to talk about all of UFC Mexico City. We're here to talk about PFL versus Bellator. We're here to talk about anything you guys want to talk about because it's been a full day of fighting. Hello there. My name is Jed Meshew. You're probably thinking to yourself, where's the handsome bald man who usually hosts these things? Mike Heck taking a well-deserved break. So tonight you got me, but fortunately we've got some other people to pick up the slack for my starry ass. Of course I'm talking. I mean, we could not happen. We're going to Mexico City. We've got to get José Youngs on board, the king of social media, the king of Fight Week, the king of Mexico.
I'll take the president. It's usually voted in. We haven't had a king in a long time. You know, there was a big war over it.
I mean, but Jose Aldo is the king of Rio, and I'm pretty sure they have democracy in Rio.
In the Battle of the Brandons, the other panelists that I'm sure you'll be about to introduce will remember this. The first time they fought, the stake was loser changes their name to Brendan. That was Royval. Now that moniker goes to Brandon Moreno. So from here on forth, on all articles he wrote, it will be Brendan Moreno. And Brandon Royval now claims his name back.
Brendan Moreno had a good run, but now it is Brandon Royval, and here to join us as well, as you mentioned, just always down to clown, Alexander K. Lee. AK, how do you feel about the new Brendan in town?
Love it. Guys, the year of the raw dog. Maybe it wasn't 2023. Maybe it wasn't 2022. Maybe it's not just a year. You know, maybe it's only a year in name. And it's actually like this whole Brandon Royval arc from the second Pantoja loss to now. Sorry, the first Pantoja loss to now. Maybe this is the year of the raw dog in its entirety. How exciting. A great main event. And to see Brandon Royval just get over that hump is pretty compelling stuff. Again, we can talk about the decision in a minute. It was an extremely close fight. I think there's like 3 rounds in there that maybe could have gone either way. So I'm excited to talk about it. It was a joy to watch either way. I don't think either man should be like viewed in any lesser light, regardless of the which side of the outcome they came out on. And I just want to say I put up a poll. Who was the biggest winner at UFC Mexico City? And just 2 options right now: Brandon Royval, and we'll talk about him more later, Brian Ortega. So people vote in the poll and let us know who's coming out of who's your first star of UFC Mexico City.
Yes, vote in the poll. Also, if you've been around for the last couple of weeks, super chats. At the end, we're going to do a Q&A session. Don't have to give us anything, but if you want to make sure your comments get seen, get talked about, fire us in with the super chat. Fortunately, this group does not have anybody like New York Rick trying to fleece you out of money, so it can all come from the goodness of your heart. Unless, of course, you want to say something about the best producer in the game, is 3024 himself. EK's Line is also here on the 1s and 2s with us, and he'll join us for that and to talk about stuff, because we got a lot of stuff to talk about, fellas. Sorry, I'm trying not to curse since, YouTube and all that. Let's start with the main event before we get into the Brian Ortega stuff. And it's a split decision win. Scores all over the place. Got a 49-46 for Brandon Moreno is the dissenting scorecard. 2 judges go 48-47 for Brandon Royval in a strange fight. I don't think it was quite the barn burner that everybody expected, given who these 2 dudes are, but it was still a fun fight. 5 rounds back and forth action. And let's start with the scoring controversy. And Jose, how did you score this fight? Are you comfortable with the Brandon Royval being the king of the Brandons now? So talk me through where you're at.
I don't have a problem that Brandon Royval won because close fights aren't robberies. I thought it was going to be 48-47 either way. I had it 48-47 for Brandon Moreno. I find it hard. Like, optically, it just seemed like Brandon Royval was probably going to win. He was throwing a lot more, and, Brandon Moreno would get takedowns but wouldn't do anything with him. But I think Brandon Royval missed on like 80% of his strikes. So if you're missing 80% of the time, if your output is more than your opponent, but you're missing at an astronomical rate, I just find it it's difficult for me to give you the win. But like optically, it clearly looked like he was the more active fighter pushing the pace. Brandon Moreno was just making him miss, or Royval was just missing. It was just a weird fight. Brandon Moreno still apparently doesn't know how to jab a southpaw. It just seems like every time like Brandon Royval would do anything, it would just kind of confuse him, and then Brandon Royval would just run forward and throw about 100 punches and miss 80 of them. So I had it for Brandon Moreno, but it's a close fight. Neither man really did enough to squeak it out. I know Amir Albazi tweeted like both men looked terrible. I wouldn't say they looked terrible, but they don't look great. They certainly didn't look great, and I don't know. It wasn't the barn burner like you said. I thought Moreno won, but I don't have an issue with the judges giving it to Royval.
Yeah, I also scored it for Brandon Moreno, though. Kind of when I did, I said I don't. This could go to Royval. I think a couple of those rounds are up in the air, and just a quick look at the statistics here. Just numbers don't always tell the story, but Royval does outland Moreno 145 to 112 in significant strikes, but his significant strike percentage is 28%. He threw and missed a whole lot. He put up 510 total strikes, and it's kind of my major takeaway here, AK, is that I think Moreno edged out the fifth round. I had it tied going in. I thought he landed the better power strikes in the final frame. But if you are getting doubled up and then some in just attempted output, even if it doesn't always land successfully, it's hard to win a fight that way. So, AK, you're the king of the robbery reviews here. One, are you going to do a robbery review on this for us? And two, is this a robbery? Is this the scorecard you had? Where are you at?
Yeah, I was 48-47 Moreno, so not a robbery. Not a robbery. No, it's way too close. Way too many rounds were close. We should break down the scoring, the official scoring a little bit here. So
All
all
over
three
the
judges
place.
yeah, well, it was. Well, all three judges agreed on round 4, which I think we all think was the clearest Royval round. No question there. If you scored round 4 anything but Royval, you're crazy. Round 5, surprisingly, all 5 gave it to Moreno. I also gave it to Moreno. I saw a lot of people, though, saying that they thought Royval ended the fight strong, and they gave him round 5. But all 3 judges were unanimous on 4 for Royval, 5 for Moreno. I like 5 for Moreno, Jed, for the reasons you said. I think his counters were really clean. I think he landed the bigger shots. It's not to discount Royval's volume or and to call it pitter patter. Like pitter patter sounds really insulting, but I just think some of the headshots that Moreno landed were closer to impacting a potential end to the fight. But again, if you gave that round to Royval, I don't see how anyone can call you crazy about that. Now rounds 1 to 3 are funny. So round 1, 2 judges for Moreno. Round 2, 2 judges for Royval, and round 3, 2 judges for Moreno.
That's crazy.
So all 3 of the first 3 rounds were disputed. It was they were all 3 first rounds were split, and this is how we ended up with a unsurprising split score at the end. And Junichiro Kamijo, yes, going 49-46 for Moreno, which again I don't think is crazy because he got the 10-9 Royval in the 4th. I don't think it's crazy. Yeah, I think you can make a case for Moreno every round. Again, I would go 3 rounds for Moreno, 4 rounds is not crazy, but again, as I said before, both guys performed really well. Jed, you're right. Moreno's strategy was a little confusing at times. I'm not entirely sure what his goal was with the way he was approaching this fight. Again, I think he did enough to win, but right now we're looking at scorecards to say he didn't. So maybe they are going to have something to talk about when he goes back to camp.
So I thought round 2 was the most obvious for Moreno. So the fact that 2 judges scored for Royval is bananas to me.
Yes, Mike Bell and Chris Lee for Royval. Yeah,
it's so odd.
I thought all the rounds were honestly pretty clear to me. I think the first round is the one that most people would view the swing, but I just kind of thought the fight was pretty obvious. And interesting to note, Casey, if you can pull that scorecard back up, if you look at it, there is a very much a world where Brandon Moreno wins this because he won 2 of 3 rounds more than Brandon Royval did. If you're doing judge scoring cumulative per round as opposed to cumulative per judge, he actually ends up getting the scorecard. So a really interesting, really fun, really funny thing. But I think we're all coming down the same side of things here, which is, yeah, maybe Brandon Moreno technically won, but it's not a robbery. He doesn't really have anyone to blame probably but himself. It's an old adage. It's terrible, but you leave things in the hands of the judges. And this is a sort of thing that can happen, particularly when you don't kind of establish yourself more. And that was one of the things that was really interesting to me about this fight is Brandon Moreno looked really confused and tepid for a lot of this fight. And Jose, do you have any idea why? Because you kind of mentioned he still hasn't figured out how to jab a southpaw, but there were just long stretches of this fight where he was looking exclusively to counter and just allowing Brandon Royval to touch him a bunch, even if it wasn't that effective.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. It just felt like I just felt like Moreno wasn't going in guns blazing again. Maybe he had a conversation with the coach, like, hey, you'd had all those wars, and they were real close. And that Pantoja fight was, everyone loved that fight, but if you stuck to the game plan, maybe you would have won. So I honestly have no idea. He's with Saif Saud, who is a absolutely fantastic coach, and I'm not going to question anything ever he does in terms of game plan. But Brandon Moreno's game plan seemed to be throw a lot of overhands. That seems like, I'm like, if he misses one of those, his arm is about to dislocate immediately because he's whiffing bad. And then Brandon Royval would follow up about 20 missed shots. It was just, yeah, it was a confusing game plan from both ends, but I'm more confused with the Moreno that showed up because it's not something we're accustomed to seeing. We're accustomed to seeing Brandon Royval this massive output that he has searching for that kill. We're not used to this trepid, like slow approach from Moreno. So I don't know what the conversation was having with his coach. I have no idea. I'm not going to question Safe, but odd approach all around. Odd from Moreno, odd from Royval, odd main event.
Yeah, I would love to hear them talk afterwards if we get Moreno in a post fight because, I mean, he looked like Chuck Liddell out there. He was just winging overhands at every point in time and coming up with air so often. But on the other side, I mean, AK, I've got the sign over the shoulder. It says, is this the year of the Raw Dog? I mean, this is your boy. And I think there are criticisms to make of Brandon Royval's performance. He comes out there. He gets to win. The most important part, as Casey likes to say, gets 2 paychecks. That's the most important thing. Is pretty exciting, at least pushing the action. He threw 500 strikes at altitude in Mexico City. That's insane. How do you feel about Brandon Royval coming off this fight, getting a win, getting his revenge, and sort of being right back in the title picture?
So high on him, so high. I don't want to take away from the Pantoja win over Royval, the one in December, and say like, oh well, Royval just wasn't himself, and that's what, because we saw Pantoja face the rawest of raw dogs when they fought the first time, and Pantoja submitted him, and then the second fight when it was made into a more methodical tactical battle, Pantoja won that one pretty clearly too. So I don't want to insult Pantoja, but I feel like this version of Royval, if we saw that berserker style in their rematch, it would have been more compelling. Again, I don't know. Maybe that leads to him getting finished by Pantoja again. But I do remember when that fight was over, and I know this was just 2 months ago, I was like, man, I want to see Royval get one more shot at it, and I want to see him fight his fight. For better or for worse, I want to see Brandon Royval fight his fight in a championship bout against Pantoja, or whoever it is has the belt, if we get another shot. And right now, it looks like that could happen because we got 301 in Rio. Pantoja seems like the guy who they're going to have to call upon to headline that card. They had him in Mexico City, probably for the purposes of setting up a rematch with Moreno. I think they would have. That's again, that fight is at least one more fight away, and that fight was amazing. The Moreno Pantoja fight was one of my favorite fights of 2023. So it's much easier to sell as a trilogy bout, or a tetralogy. Because a tetralogy, if you count the Ultimate Fighter, because Pantoja has beaten him 3 times. But I think
don't bring that quadrilogy talk.
I know
it's
not a thing. It's not a thing.
You almost did it.
Damn you, Aliens 4, or whatever movie that made that happen. I lost my train of thought with the whole quadrilogy thing. But no. Pantoja Moreno, I think, was the fight that the UFC was clearly angling towards. Royval said this himself in the MMA Hour. He was asked point blank by Ariel, do you think that they're lining you up to get a shot? And he's like, I think the plan is if it's Moreno for sure, but I don't think they're planning to put me in there. But guess what? He got the W now. And again, in a great fight, maybe not the most convincing win, but it's a really good fight. If you want Pantoja to headline, you could do a lot worse than Royval. Maybe you want to pick out another flyweight, but for me, in my mind, Royval's done enough to earn it. And I really just think the December fight was really not the best version of him that we saw. So I'm fine with him getting a shot very soon after.
Has he done enough to earn it, though? Because that is kind of the big next step question for this main event is, look, that's a terrific win. he just lost dominantly to Alexandre Pantoja in December. We're not even talking about a full year. We're talking 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago. He just got run pillar to post by Pantoja. I know that they pretty clearly were setting up this Moreno fight. Even that felt a little silly given the circumstances. But Jose, are you comfortable? Like, are you fine with them running Royval right back into this?
It's by default. Like I talked about this on the preview show with Shaheen and Eric. It's literally just by default because Manel Kopp can't make weight, Amir Albazi can't stay healthy, and then Kai Kara-France still dealing with concussions. Like it's literally by default. So the fact that Moreno and Pantoja and Royval were getting all of these rematches, it's because they're the only ones that can, like you book them, they're gonna show up to fight almost every time. They'll take last-minute fights, as we saw with Brandon Royval. Brandon Moreno will weigh in as a backup in December. Pantoja will do everything he can to fight as much as he can in Brazil. These are the three most reliable guys in the division, and we're getting guys like Tagir and Makhachev and Tatsuro Taira. They're on the up and up, but they're just not there yet. So it's by default that Brandon Royval will probably get the next title shot because Manel didn't make weight. Mateus Nicolau, had just lost to Brandon Royval and was supposed to fight Manel Kopp. Amir Albazi was supposed to fight Brandon Moreno because if Amir Albazi had beat Brandon Moreno, no brainer. If Brandon Moreno had beaten Amir Albazi, no brainer. So it's not for lack of trying. The UFC is trying to get new contenders. They just can't stay healthy or they can't make weight. So Brandon Royval is reliable. So he's probably going to get the next title shot. And I know a lot of people talk about like, oh, why aren't certain guys headlining? Why aren't certain guys getting opportunities? And I think a factor that a lot of people don't take into account is, yeah, you win, but are you reliable? Have you won a fight, but did you pull out of like 5-6 in a row? Can we rely on you to make weight? Can we rely on you to show up? You can with Brandon Royval. So I think by default he gets the shot, and I don't have a problem with it because Brandon Royval, like I'm not like sign me up for Brandon Royval versus Pantoja because that like I didn't hate the first fight. It wasn't as good as Pantoja Moreno, but I would love to see that fight again. So yeah, sure, why not? By default, Royval gets it.
You make a great point. Say it all the time. The best ability is availability, and Royval is always available. And to his credit, like he tried to sell the fight. He cut a promo at the end, called out Pantoja who's sitting there.
If you looked at the UFC's Twitter
he gave
account,
up the game.
He broke kayfabe and hugged him. I'm like, fool.
He gave up the game. It was tough. I did enjoy Pantoja sitting cage side during the fight and just flashing a 5-0 up there with his hands because he is 5-0 over the 2 men in this main event collectively. Alejandro Pantoja's the boss is the long story short here. And I will say, before we move on from this to other stuff, we do have a fight next weekend that could change this. I think if Moreno wins, he's going to get that out. He would have gotten the opportunity. I think just because Pantoja lost in December, it is so fresh in the mind that, and he didn't win by submitting Moreno or finishing him. It was a contentious split decision. I think if Muhammad Makhachev goes out there and finishes Alex Perez next weekend, I think he might just slot in there. Like, undefeated prospect. If Perez wins, then he also just lost to Pantoja, so you probably just run it back with Royval. But Makhachev's young, got a lot of heat on him. If he gets a big performance, I think he somehow has slotted himself into this title picture because of the failings of Manel Kopp and Amir Albazi, et cetera, et cetera. So interesting times at 125 right now.
Interesting times if you're a flyweight at ATT, because I'm pretty sure they train with each other. Also, it's wild that Muhammad Makhachev has only fought in London and Abu Dhabi, and he's making his U.S. debut in the Apex. Just about because it's supposed to be the Saudi. This is supposed to be the Saudi card.
Yeah, this is the Saudi card. Yep. I didn't even think about the ATT thing. That will be very interesting because I don't think Makhachev would say no.
I don't think Pantoja would say no either.
Yeah, so that this is the problem with ATT. When you have a lot of the best fighters in the world, at some point they're going to fight each other. But speaking of the best fighters in the world fighting each other, I have to begrudgingly say this. In your co-main event, Brian Ortega submits Yair Rodriguez, comes in off a 18-month layoff, a almost 2-year layoff, last fought in 2022, and has a real tough first round, injures himself before the fight because somehow that's a thing. He is jumping up and down during the announcements and rolls his ankle. Yair Rodriguez puts the wood to him in the first round, but at the end of it, Ortega, builds a little bit of momentum back, and then kind of felt like Rodriguez gassed himself out, but it was pretty much one-way traffic from the second round on. Ortega started getting the takedowns, and very quickly into the third round, almost immediately gets a takedown, moves through positions, locks up an arm triangle choke, and submits Yair Rodriguez, the former interim champion. And I don't know what to make of this or what to do with with this information. So, AK, I'm going to throw it to you. Talk to me about Brian Ortega and why he continues to win fights that he is losing for large portions of them.
He's really good, man. He's really good. You got to give us the credit, Chad. The man can scrap. The man knows how to fight. He's inhumanly tough. He's a great finisher. This is one of the things we sort of talked about when we were like shellacking Jelton Almeida a while back against Derek Lewis, right? Like I was like defending the performance, but I think you and New York Rick and whoever else was on the show were reminding me like, the best way to survive a fight is to win a fight, is to be able to finish the fight. And I know I'm stating the obvious here. I know this is like, oh, what great hardcore analysis this is. But it's true. For a guy with such a high finishing rate, as long as he's able to do that, he's always going to have a chance. And I was very foolish to count Ortega out after round one. I said in our Slack channel, I'm like, well, there's no way he's going to be able to last another 20 minutes after Yair kind of put it on in round one. But he survives. He gets the grappling going in round two. We all know, man, he gets a fight to the ground. Ortega's got a good chance against anyone. And then by a minute into round three, it's Yair who's gassed. It's Yair who had nothing left in the tank. So I don't know, Jed. Your mileage may vary. You're right. Ortega has a lot of weird wins in him. I think his whole run towards like becoming a contender was filled with like third round finishes in fights that he was either losing or wasn't convincingly winning. But it doesn't matter. That's why fights are 15 minutes, right? It doesn't matter whether you finish the first round or you finish in the 14th minute. If you have that ability, it's always going to give you a chance. Do I think Brian Ortega is like fully back on to being like a world title contender? Would I favor him over Ilia Topuria or even Alexander Volkanovski, like a rematch? Probably not. But it was a really fun performance to watch. I picked it wrong. Thought Yair was going to handle him in my predictions. Surprise. I mean, I've got I also picked the main event wrong. People are used to this when they read my predictions. So let's give Ortega credit where it's due. Again, I don't know where this is going to put him in the long run, but to come back from such a long layoff and score his first win since 2018, that's pretty damn impressive.
I mean, it is definitely impressive. I have a lot of thoughts about Brian Ortega. They can be summed up in one fun statistical fact. He has 12 fights in the UFC. Do you care to guess how many of those opponents he has outstruck? The answer is 2. He has landed more strikes than 2. Zombie, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
One of them. The other one is Thiago Tavares in his second UFC fight. He outlanded him by 2 significant strikes. The man is a modern day Nogueira. He is getting his ass beat right up until the moment that he is winning the fight. It's astonishing. He is exceedingly durable, and that is helpful. And he has no inclination for self-defense whatsoever, and that is why he gets beat up a bunch. But against Yair Rodriguez, it worked out. Jose, what are your thoughts on Brian Ortega? Has he reinserted? I mean, he has, by definition, reinserted himself back into the top of the division, back to the title picture. Where do we go with Brian Ortega from here?
I don't think he's going to get the title shot. I wouldn't complain if he got it, because like a Brian Ortega, Mexican American versus Ilia Topuria, a Georgian Spaniard, would be big money in the Latin world. Not as big as if Yair had won, like a homeland Mexican. But Ortega versus Ilia sells on paper, and it sells in terms of skill set. Yair will talk all that greasiness to Ilia, and Ilia will also talk all that greasiness. Brian's not really that guy. Like, even in media day, he's just like, oh, we'll see. I just got to get through Yair first. Meanwhile, Yair's
the eagle.
Like, F-bombing. Yeah, talking about eagles and stuff. Meanwhile, Yair's F-bombing. Ilia saying it's on site no matter where they are. So I'm also pretty confident that 90% of the world, including almost everyone on this staff, was already booking Yair versus Ilia 3 minutes into the fight, when Yair is kicking Brian Ortega into the fence, and everyone's like, "Oh, this would be a great fight against Ilya," and then Brian Ortega does what Brian Ortega does and pulls something out of his ass and wins. I think he should still fight Movsar. Brian, like Yair, had all this hype around him. As the former interim champion, he was fighting in Mexico. He's an incredibly exciting fighter. I think if he had won, I wouldn't have complained if he got the title shot because, hype sells and storylines sell. This is basically just professional wrestling at this point. But I do think Alex Volkanovski should get the next shot. I know people in MMA fighting don't like immediate rematches, but, Alex has been the most available champion, one of the most available fighters over the last few years. I know we don't like to use the word deserve, but I do think hard work should pay off at some point in your life. And Volkanovski, I think, has done the work, and I do think he should get the shot. I'm still bummed out Jose Aldo never got his rematch against Conor. I think Alex should get his rematch against Ilya, and I think Brian Ortega should fight Movsar in the co-main event as some sort of backup fighter around there. Movsar has talked all that trash to Brian Ortega on social media. Brian Ortega even laughed at it, said that it's actually pretty funny. The storyline is there, and the winner of Movsar versus Brian Ortega, especially if it's a 5-round co-main event fight, that the winner of that is then a clear number one contender. And we're not having this who deserves it more, who should do it, who's leapfrogging what. Movsar, Brian Ortega, co-main, Ilya versus Alex Volkanovski, main event. Have yourselves a nice little fatal four-way, or final four, if you would. Fatal four is all at the same time. Final four of featherweights. Alliteration, beautiful. You're welcome, UFC. Stick it in Spain too.
Look, I really like that idea a whole heck of a lot. I'm not sure that happens, but it does feel like it will.
Probably not.
AK, I know we're going to do on to the next one in a few hours here, so I won't ask you to give that away. But
I'm happy to do it. I can do it.
Do you think
it's not a secret?
Yeah, but this is just the question is just: do you even think that that Ortega could get the title shot? Because I'll be honest, I super don't want it to happen. A part of me is quite interested in watching, for my money, the worst defensive fighter in MMA go up against Ilia Topuria, because that's it's going to lead to something fun to watch, if nothing else. So, do you think that that's like in play at this point?
Oh, it's completely in play. He has a great chance. It's dependent on if they want to do the Volkanovski rematch, how long will they have to wait for Volkanovski to come back, which again could be a while or could be not a while at all. If you're Volkanovski, the guy doesn't seem to care about taking time off. It's really us in the media and probably some fans who keep going like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if Volk took like 6 to 9 months off and at least try to sort of rejuvenate? And, there's no coming back from the wear and tear and some of the damage he's taken, but it certainly couldn't hurt him to take like 9 months off. But if he did take that long off, then he's kind of out of the Topuria rematch, right? Topuria could wait. I don't know if we want Topuria to do that. Movsar is the other option, and I love Movsar, but Dana White totally crapped on him at UFC 297. If it's up to me, Movsar is actually my pick. I would have him over Volkanovski only because I expect Volkanovski to take a break. But I don't know if the UFC is that crazy about that. So Ortega slides right in there. I still think it's going to somehow end up being Movsar, if only because, again, Volkanovski break. Ortega, he took a lot of damage in this fight. Maybe he needs a break too. Who knows what happened to his ankle? So I have to say Movsar, but Ortega's a very, very realistic option. And again, based on logistics, may have leapfrogged over Volkanovski and Evloev just by getting a win. He's winning our poll, by the way, the biggest winner, convincingly. 78% say Brian Ortega is the biggest winner at UFC Mexico City.
I mean, I think that makes sense. He has potentially just set himself up for his third title fight in 6 fights, despite also taking 2 years off and having a win over someone who is currently like ranked and employed, as opposed to previously where all of his wins had since retired for a long stretch. We could talk more about this fight, but we still have a ton of other stuff to talk about, and I'm sure we'll get questions since this is probably the biggest thing that happened this weekend. But first, bonuses. I think the co-main event is the fight that will have the most eyes talked about it. First, let's do bonuses for the UFC, then do a brief rundown of the rest of the card, and then we can switch over because we got a second event that we do at least need to give some love to. Your bonuses, fight of the night. I mean, these are all straightforward. Fight of the night is Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado. That ended up being your feature bout this evening because Raul Rosas Jr. fell ill, was in the back training to go out or prepping to go out, and then hands were wrapped, and then they pulled him from the card. I was not watching like super closely, so I don't know the exact timeline, but they pulled them on like the main card. It was like, yeah, we're just not doing this
They
anymore.
were.
So
I'm pretty sure the Yasmin fight ended, and then Brandon Fitzgerald was like, "Hey, I hate to do this, but Raul got sick, so we're moving to the Daniel Zellhuber fight."
So just bumping it up.
Yeah.
But Zellhuber Prado had a terrific fight. And then performance of the nights, Brian Ortega gets one, and Manuel Torres on the main card opener submits Chris Duncan in like 2 minutes with an RNC. A beautiful performance, pretty straightforward stuff. You could have maybe given it to some other people, but the rest of the outcomes here: Yasmin Yaraguay defeats Sam Hughes by unanimous decision. Jaime Barcelos defeats Christian Quinones by submission in the third round at RNC. Jesus Santos Aguilar defeats Mateus Mendonça with a split decision. Edgar Chairez, Daniel Lacerda in the fight that we all needed to see, that had to happen for closure. Triangle choke in the first 2 minutes of the fight, just like should have happened last time. Freeze CM beats Claudio Puelles by split decision. We had 3 or 4 splitties on this card. We had a few. Because Felipe dos Santos also beats Victor Altamirano by split decision, the rare 27-30, 29-28, 29-28 splitty. Ronaldo Rodriguez beats Denis Bondar with a submission, and opening up the card, Muhammad Naimov beats Eric Silva. A weird TKO leg injury, like before the fight really got started. It was an odd start to the evening, but fellas, aside from the big 2 fights, kind of what's the low-key banger? What's what's Mike Heck say, the low-key all-star? What's the biggest takeaway outside banger of the top fights?
Well, right out of the gate, it's Jesus Aguilar, not Jesus Aguilar. That was very funny. Anyway, low-key banger. I mean, the Jaime Barcelos fight was bananas for as long as it lasted. I know there was a little bit of weird stuff
at the end.
Christian Quinones was complaining about like an illegal kick or something. I didn't think it was illegal, but Jaime Barcelos proves to just be a maniac. That dude will just throw down with anyone. He's also, oddly enough, I really appreciate this as someone who has to do a lot of social media graphics. His fights are so photogenic because they're so violent, and he's a guy that closes gaps with long looping punches and kicks that it just creates such great imagery. Like a lot of these like dirty boxers or grapplers, like there's a lot of action happening, but it's like looking at a Rubik's cube of like punches, and it's not always the best. Jaime Barcelos is on my short list of most photogenic, violent fighters just because it's so. I would love to see Esther shoot his fights because I think she would pull out some great stuff. But yeah, I mean that seems to be the no-brainer. That dude just fights like a psycho every time.
I mean, he's got 3 fight of the nights, and it could be like 7. Jaime Barcelos is awesome. Just a get got all-star, just an action fighter par excellence. AK, what's kind of your big non-major takeaway from the fight card?
I'm so excited about the lightweight division. Daniel Zellhuber and Manuel Torres are just really compelling prospects, and in different ways too. I mean, Zellhuber is only 24, and he's got some the fact that he has beyond functional, an excellent jab already makes him like more dangerous than and more technically dangerous than like 80% of the fighters in MMA.
He's got a jab, and he's 6'1" at lightweight.
Yeah, he's huge.
That combo that's going to win you a lot of fights.
How many oversized fighters have we seen? We're just like, man, imagine this guy had a jab, and they never develop it, and they have like solid careers, but never make it to the next level. And you're always wondering, like, God, if they just had that jab. So I don't know. Zellhuber has a lot to fill out. Don't get me wrong. Very young guy. He's got good experience already, but there's plenty more to come. But just having that weapon makes him compelling. He's now won 3 straight, so good for him. And Manuel Torres, I don't know what his ceiling is. Like, it feels like the upside is lower than Zellhuber, but God, he's exciting. I mean, he's just going in there to finish everyone he fights or get finished. I think it's 10 straight fights now that he has not gone out of the first round. He does not. I don't know if you guys. I sorry, I didn't listen to No Best Part this week, Jad. I don't know if this guy was a guaranteed under If you said bet like $5,000 this guy's going under because he has no interest in going past the first round. I'm sure when he gets to step up in competition, we might see that change. But both Torres and Zellhuber, I thought, showed up. We're given main card spots. They might not be the biggest names yet, but those spots turned out to be well deserved, and it won't be the last time you see them in the final 5 fights of a UFC event.
Yeah, Zellhuber's mine for sure, and it feels like a cop out. It's a feature fight, but he's 24, and this kid's going to be a top 15 lightweight. Like he's developed really well. He came in with some shine. He took that loss to Trey Ogden in his debut, but he was 22 at the time, and that's sort of the kind of thing you expect for fighters making a big leap, making a big step into a whole new world. But you hear this kid talk. I mean, looks good getting off the bus. Handsome dude, fluent in multiple languages. Like you could put the boosters to this man if he can keep kind of developing on the pace he is. And I love Francisco Prado. He is probably not going to be like great, but he's going to be a dude who can hang around. I mean, he's 21 or 22, something insanely young. He's going to be able to hang around the UFC for 15 years, just having a John McDessie-like career of really fun fights, probably undersized for this weight class, but whatever. He's just out there scrapping as long as his body can hold up, because he got messed up in this fight at one point in his corner. It's just tough. It's just really, really tough for him. So, yeah, a pretty good fight card overall, unless you are a believer in flyweight unders, and it was tough, but a pretty solid return to Mexico City. And you know what the best part about it, guys? It was the second event of the day. We already were warmed up. We were ready to imbibe all of these fights because kicking the day off, yes, there was a KSW event. If y'all want to talk about it, you could drop a super chat because otherwise we probably won't, even though it's pretty fun because it's KSW. But we got to talk about the other major event of the year. The co-leader made its 2024 debut with the PFL versus Bellator champs fight card. Champs versus champs. Ultimately, it ended up being like 2 champs versus champs and then some former champs versus some current champs, or maybe they were just let go of a belt. It's kind of a weird situation for some of these fights. Some fights fell through. But in your main event, in an outcome no one could have predicted, Hernan Ferreira knocks out Ryan Bader in 21 seconds to claim the super belt and the lone victory for PFL in the evening. The rest of the evening was swept by Bellator fighters as Johnny Eblin defeats Impa Kasanganay in a very contentious split decision. I think we'll talk about that. If you guys have seen the fight, I don't know if y'all watched it or not. I did. Jason Jackson beats Ray Cooper, just sort of runs right over him. Vadim Nemkov makes his heavyweight re-debut. He fought back there in Rizin, but comes back to heavyweight after years as the light heavyweight champ. Beats Bruno Capoloza with an arm triangle choke in the second round, an absolute demolition. My boy Yoel Romero gets a W over Thiago Santos in a fight that was exactly like we all believed it would be. AJ McKee keeps on winning. He submits Clay Collard. Looked sensational. I am sure Casey will want to come in and talk about AJ McKee and talk about Aaron Pico, who just ran over Henry Corrales. Corrales stepping in on short notice. One of the guys who handed Pico his first career loss. Pico gets it back. Biagio Ale Walsh makes his pro debut, gets a win in a fight that happened. Clarissa Shields gets a split decision win in a fight that happened. And a couple of prelim fighters that we don't really need to talk about. So, fellas, PFL versus Bellator champs. First off, did y'all watch this?
I was unavailable, so I did not. My input will be limited here, though obviously I kept up in the amazing coverage at MMAfighting.com. And I'm very aware of the results and some of the highlights, and certainly, I was keeping up with people talking about it. Certainly the buzz around it. It was sounded like an eventful show. So I heard some positive things about the pacing. And before we go to Jose, let me just say, big pat on the back to the MMA Fighting crew. We did amazing with our topology picks. I guess we should give people like some way to look at these, but no worse than I think 8 out of how many fights were there on the card? 8 out of 8 correct
over
picks.
11 on the PFL.
Yeah, no worse than 8 correct picks in Mexico City, and no worse than 9 correct picks for the PFL card. I am embarrassed. My one miss was Thiago Santos. I picked him to beat Yoel Romero, and you're right, Jed. If I had just used common sense, I could have been celebrating my first perfect set of picks since I think some random UFC card in St. Petersburg or something like that. This is worse than when I picked Sarah McMahon to beat Ronda Rousey, which also cost me a perfect card once upon a time. So
that was at least
we don't learn. Was it? Was it though?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
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 Was it? In retrospect, was it?
I mean, in
So I'm
retrospect, a lot
embarrassed.
of bad choice can be made.
But we did really well today. Maybe the PFL card wasn't that hard to pick. I think maybe the picks are pretty
It was
obvious,
not.
but we did a good job though. I think MMA fighting. Good job.
Go us. Jose, did you watch this?
Yeah, I tuned in right I think halfway through the first round of the Clara Shields fight, and then I did it.
That was a tough time to start watching.
I can't say that I was locked in on every single fight, but obviously I was pretty locked in for the Pico, McKee, Nemkov, and main event fight, and then I watched every fight, but I wasn't hyper focused on every single one. I was working it, obviously.
Yeah.
I will say the production, like the camera and everything, was terrible. Terrible.
Was I the only person that actually really watched the PFL? Because I have plenty to say.
I worked it.
I watched it. I watched it,
yeah.
but I would me and Eric were both working the PFL stuff, so we were taking turns stuff. But the production
Casey,
was ass though.
Casey, I knew you had stuff to say, and I was going to rope you in here. I will say, to follow up on Jose's, production was really, really tough. That being said, big picture, I think this was a pretty successful endeavor for PFL. This was never going to be a moneymaker on pay-per-view. I am certain that it was not, just because it never could be, but they took some lessons. The pacing on this card was phenomenal. The start was rough.
Beautiful.
The start was really rough because the first fight didn't happen until like 50 minutes into the broadcast. But once they got the ball rolling, I mean, they were moving along at a good clip. That was a welcome change. The booth, it is what it is. It was a mix of the PFL and Bellator booths. It's not to everyone's taste, certainly not to mine, but wasn't awful. And they had everything going pretty well for their first sort of endeavor in 2024 and under the new PFL Bellator schema. I think there are a lot of good takeaways here. And ultimately, I think all the right people for the promotion won. So Casey, I do want to bring you in since you watched this and obviously have some major takeaways as well. Just before I give you kind of the big thing I'm taking away from the fights here, what is yours? What stands out? What performance truly stands out to you as significant, other than the co-main event? Because we're going to specifically talk about that.
Performance-wise, I think no performance actually kind of blew me away in the sense that all the favorites won, and if you look at, I think every favorite won on the card.
Every favorite won.
Yeah, so nothing really blew me away, honestly.
It was a very easy card to pick. I remember on the preview show, we were all pretty confident that Bellator would sweep, if not maybe lose one.
Yeah. Obviously, the biggest shock to me was, it wasn't a shock because he still won, was my pick for the best middleweight in the world. He could have easily lost that fight. If the judges would have gave it to Impa, I wouldn't have gone, But Impa, I thought, just really overperformed, and Johnny Eblin actually came back from some serious adversity and won the fight. So I'll give him some credit, but it was a fight he should have won more easily. But being 3 rounds, I don't know. They're fighting at midnight and outside in the desert. Who knows? Romero and Santos.
The fight was perfect.
I can't believe how accurate you were in that fight. I was like, "Oh, you guys are overselling how bad this fight will be." And I was like, "No, you guys are underselling it." Congratulations! It was amazing. It was amazing how on point you guys were with the prediction for that. Aaron Pico and AJ McKee looked phenomenal, especially AJ McKee coming against a prepared Clay Collard. Poor Henry Corrales came off the couch. It looked like he came off the couch. But Aaron Pico did what he should have done and completely rolled through him. But my biggest takeaway about the card was mainly actually, it just didn't, outside of the big kind of entrance and everything, the card just didn't feel like a big thing. I don't know. There were points in the main event where I swear they were in the apex. And I should never even think that. I don't know.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Casey, because that's very real.
And that's a very big issue to me with cards. Because we watch the old Strikeforce cards and stuff, even though they were on Showtime. they had big promo packages. I don't know, the crowd was into it. It just felt like a bunch of oil people from Saudi Arabia threw a bunch of money, and this was their own private, MMA event for their buddies or something. I don't know. And it was open to the public. It just didn't feel like a big thing. Like ranking wise, there were amazing fighters on this card, but it just didn't matter because something wasn't there, and I'm not sure what it is. And as soon as, because you watch any fight on that pay-per-view card, PFL, the biggest Bellator card ever, and then you watch just a fight night card in the UFC, everything just looked better on the UFC card. It just did. And that's no matter how good the fights are, if they don't look good, they don't feel big, it just doesn't matter. And to me, that was my biggest takeaway from the PFL pay-per-view.
The lack of a actual crowd was kind of a bummer. Like you said, it was just a bunch of rich people and celebrities.
Yeah.
And then like really apparent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And real quick too, the pacing was great, but I think they actually went too far the other way in since that the pacing was too fast, and since that there weren't any big promos or before the main event, there wasn't a reminder why this fight is so important, because I don't know who Renan Ferreira really is. I don't keep up with PFL. I don't like PFL's product. I watch the results, I go, okay, this guy's good, but I don't honestly know very much about them. But there weren't any kind of really big promotional package. It's just like a 2-minute little thing before they come out. I don't know. And I think they didn't do that to make the show go faster. And I feel like we needed those couple minutes. I don't know. And they got rid of the smart. I don't think they mentioned smart cage. I don't think they talked about how fast
they did, but they didn't mention a lot. They didn't have any of the stats running on it.
Okay, so they are listening at some point to us, and they did.
They're moving away. They're moving away from their base, is what they're doing.
And one thing they did do very well, actually, is the use of John McCarthy with the little cutaway when there were any sort of judges issues, or that was very smart, because we've complained a lot about
how he should have been used for the last 6 years.
Yeah, and they did it perfectly, and that I want them. Those are good things. And there are a couple of bad things, but overall, I still think a good day for PFL Bellator, but not a home run, a really good, a ground roll double, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like they overproduced in terms of like the production, is what I'm trying to say. The production was a little too over the top, awful lighting.
The lighting was so bad.
The lighting was really bad. It was worse than your lighting right now.
Yeah, it's like at least they had lighting. They had access to natural light, and they chose not to use it. My excuse is it's nighttime, and I have no light. Like, I have a valid excuse. They're $1 billion. They probably have $1 billion from Saudi. But it was such a jarring contrast of all of this over this fire and pyrotechnics, and then they cut to John McCarthy in a storage closet with a podcast microphone. I love in John McCarthy in that role, but I do like how the NFL and the NBA do it, where they cut to their expert that's in an actual truck, a studio truck, with the stuff playing in the background for him to explain, not just John McCarthy in his podcast chair, but baby steps.
But the lighting for the actual fights was just awful.
It made BKFC look like an Emmy Award winning production.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's my 2 cents on this. That's my.
Can we talk about Renan Ferreira? Can we talk about Renan?
Yeah.
Can we talk? Can we talk about Renan?
We can, but it kind of doesn't matter. So Renan Ferreira just ices Ryan Bader in the most Ryan Bader loss that's ever existed. If you've ever seen him fight a dude who hits real hard and is big, you've seen the fight with Renan Ferreira. It is the Anthony Rumble Johnson fight in replica.
And then, Brandon, anyone who didn't see it like me, Francis Ngannou then proudly stepped into the cage to defend his PFL territory.
I was actually about to say that for all the build-up that was done in the pre-fight of PFL saying explicitly Francis is going to fight the winner, Francis even kind of intimating something, though maybe saying it less definitively than PFL did. Francis Ngannou is sitting cage side, and he leaves before the fight is done. The fight is done, and he sort of exits after the announcement. I don't even think he was there for Hernan Ferreira's call out, because Hernan does get on there through the translator, makes his case. I'm one of the best heavyweights in the world. Where are you? You got to fight me, et cetera, et cetera. And Francis is already gone. It seems unlikely that Francis Ngannou will be fighting Hernan Ferreira anytime soon. So, well, Hernan gets the belt with the ring in it, and this is the biggest win of his career, I think, undeniably, as far as quality of opposition goes. Even though Ryan Bader is 40, it's still, what exactly that means is still up in the air. The co-main event is, I think, the biggest takeaway from this fight card as well, because Johnny Eblin was in serious trouble against Impa Kasanganay. He got hurt really badly in the first round was pretty meh on both sides. Eblin had a big lead. Impa kind of built his way into it. And then Impa comes out like bat out of hell in the second round, tags Eblin. Eblin is hurt. He's in survival mode for 2-ish minutes, gets through it, and Impa is pretty tired. Seems like he may have shot himself in the foot, fired too many bullets there. And Eblin just starts to take over in the third round, still competitive. And if you scored that third round for Impa, it is not necessarily wrong, or even the first round, honestly. But Eblin just kind of wills himself to victory with the gas tank as Impa starts to fade. And by the end of it, it certainly at least looked like Eblin is going to win rounds 4 and 5 if they had happened, but survives by the skin of his teeth. And I pitched this internally afterwards. Casey, certainly for you, as you have been the biggest Johnny Eblin guy, is this going to knock him down our rankings come the next rankings update? Because I think we can all respect what Impa Kasanganay did last year. It's kind of an incredible career turnaround from him, but that was not a very good performance from Eblin, just to be frank. Despite gutting it out and getting the win, showing some good qualities, it was a tough night in the office for him. And is he going to drop from being the top middleweight in the world for you?
I seriously thought about it. In the end, I don't think I am. Mostly because I just don't think DDP being the best middleweight in the world still kind of throws me off a little bit. Mostly because I feel like 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 on the middleweights, I feel like they all beat each other. Yeah, I think there's not a dominant middleweight in the world right now. There just isn't. I believe. But I'm just gonna give more credit to Impa that he just really is just much better than I thought he was, and he is improving as a fighter. I'm just going to give Impa a lot more credit than I gave him coming into this fight. And no, Johnny Eblin did not fight his best fight, but even on his worst fight, he still got the win, and that's enough to keep him in the number 1 spot. But I understand if people want to, bump him down a little bit, or kind of like, haha, I told you he wasn't any good. So, yeah, it's just one of those. But yeah, I want to give more credit to the guy that lost than take away from the guy that won.
I think that's a fair reading. Like, Impa Kasanganay is clearly a better fighter than the dude who got highlighted by Joaquin Buckley. Like, he has clearly improved a lot over the last couple of years. I will be interested to see sort of if he continues to compete at 185. Obviously, he won the PFL title at 205. He was a welterweight-ish for a little bit of time there. So 185 feels like it's probably the true natural for him, and he looked good for stretches of this. Before we go to the peeps, I do just want to say a quick rundown of things that we've already mentioned, but don't need to be harped on, except for Vadim Nemkov is actually the dude who should fight Francis Ngannou.
Best heavyweight on the card.
Yes.
Like, best heavyweight on the card for sure. Hernan Ferreira, Francis would at least be fun, but Vadim Nemkov is probably the fight we want to see. And Aaron Pico and AJ McKee are incredible and top 10 in the world at their weight class, whatever weight class that actually ends up being for AJ McKee. They are unbelievable.
Imagine a world where we could get like if Aaron Pico was in the conversation of like who should Brian Ortega fight next? Like, imagine if we could have like AJ should AJ McKee fight Brian Ortega next? Like, yes, 100%. Like, it's so annoying that they're not all there. And we have to talk about the weird, very bizarre John Jones interview.
That's how I was going to end the PFL thing.
That was so stupid. Like John Jones looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin, and then Sean O'Connell was like, the fight could happen, but it's not held up on our. I'm like, fuck off. Like that's so lame. That's
I
so
loved it. I
lame.
loved it.
Yeah,
I
but
loved
you're
it.
like 45, and that's like such an old head move. Like, we draw the line. Like, shut up, dude. You know it's not going to happen. You know it's not going to happen. You're just like posturing up because it's your big day, and like it's not going to happen. Like John Jones is the best heavyweight in the world, and he basically has to do the interview. It's like, shut up. Like, shut up. It was so lame. It was just this old man be like, yeah, come challenge me. I back him. I'm like, fuck off. Get out of here with that weak ass
John
shit.
Jones accepted a first-class flight.
I'm not talking about John
Albuquerque
Jones. I'm talking about Sean O'Connell being like, the fight could happen, but it's not because it's not on our end. It's not. I'm like, fuck off. We've had this conversation. It ain't happened. Didn't happen with Strikeforce. Didn't happen with Pride. Didn't happen with Bellator. Like, you're not like, the more you talk about it, the less likely it's gonna happen. If you know anything about Dana White, the more you push him, the less likely it'll happen. So just focus on your own product, bro. That's all I have to say. That was so lame. It was so lame.
Can I give you a little inside baseball here, Jed, before you go? Regarding the sort of the atmosphere of the interview, we had an internal discussion about a headline that we were working on for the story. Damon was writing the story, and we asked. I think I can say this on the air. It's fine. And one headline that was proposed was John Jones endures uncomfortable interview as PFL broadcaster blames UFC for Francis Ngannou fight not happening. And we all agreed, like, okay, we can't really frame it that way. It's not like anytime
it's not objectively true, but it is true.
It's hard to, like, in a headline, unless someone says a certain word, you can't really say how they're feeling. That's kind of a rule of a headline. You can't say this person felt this way unless they said it or clearly conveyed it in the through their words. So he didn't say it, but we also all agreed that was clearly in an uncomfortable interview.
His eyes conveyed it. His eyes conveyed it, AK.
The content of the conversation conveyed it. Yes, we could not say that, but I think, as you guys are kind of talking about, anyone who watched it was like, uncomfortable is a great word to describe what happened here.
It was a super odd moment, and it was the culmination of a story that they had been running the entire evening, basically. From the outset of the broadcast, it was, tonight is a night where champions between two organizations compete. This never happens. They repeatedly said that this is the first time that's ever happened, like conveniently forgetting that Bellator v Ryzen is a gimmick that they have been doing for a hot minute.
That's why it's so lame. It was so lame.
A lot of it is like,
it was cooler when Ryzen did it too.
I'm with you 95% of the way, Jose, and that it is lame to do this in general and then to put John Jones, whose fault it is not for this specific reason, sort of on blast to defend the UFC. But also at the same time, John didn't need to be there for any reason. He just chose to be there. So you kind of play dumb games and win dumb prizes.
You gave John Jones this is how stupid this segment was. You gave John Jones a very uncomfortable platform with Francis Ngannou like 5 feet over. Just bring Francis Ngannou on, and so they just kept cutting to each other, showing Francis Ngannou calling John Jones fat, and then you give John Jones the mic so he can hype up a fight with Stipe and Tom Aspinall, who aren't even in your promotion. Like, and Francis isn't even going to fight in MMA ever. So, like, fuck off.
He said he will. He said he will, Jose.
Cool story, bro. Big if true. Jake Paul said the same thing, and that ain't happening either.
And so Conor McGregor.
I loved it. That's all. I loved it.
It's so dumb.
I loved it.
Promotional malpractice.
Made me uncomfortable.
Former colleague.
Oh, it was great.
So that's the rundown on the PFL. And look, it's 2 a.m. on the East Coast. Not all of us are there, but I've been watching fights since noon. So I think it's time that we get to the peeps. If you've got questions, drop them in the chat. Casey will pull them up.
Fights since 1990.
Well, we got some super chats, Casey.
Sure, I've also been doing that, but at some point I've had sleep.
We got some compelling super
You know the deal by now. You got questions, drop in the chat. We'll pull up and answer them. Super chat's going to get priority, so drop a little extra scratch, and we will talk about the topics you want, be it UFC Mexico City, PFL versus Bellator, or even KSW or whatnot. Terrence Leverett, thank you for super chatting, Terrence. Fluke injury parlay hit, boys. Winner get that title shot next. So I am assuming that the fluke injury probably speaking of is the Brandon Royval, Brian Ortega, who obviously in these rematches both ended somewhat controversially in their first iteration. So
Now I get it.
Yeah, that's if there's another one that I missed in there.
No,
I don't think so, but definitely the top
I
two.
hadn't even thought about this, but that's really interesting.
Yep.
It's it's funny how that worked out. Winners getting title shots next, though. We kind of touched on this already. Brandon Royval seems like he has a really good shot at it, given just sort of the openness of flyweight. Brian Ortega, I'm on to the next one with AK. I won't spoil it. I don't think he's getting it next, but it wouldn't be totally shocking if he did, because featherweight, a lot of balls are up in the air at that division right now as well. So, you guys agree with that? Correct?
Yeah.
Wouldn't be my
like
first choice, but won't be surprised.
Yeah, at least one of them will. I really feel like at least one of them will.
I'm leaning toward Ortega. I think the timing might be there, but yeah,
I'll take the under. I will say that neither of them will get it. I won't be shocked if it happens, but if I had to pick what will happen, I think it will be neither will get it.
Okay.
Casey Carpenter, who sucks more, Ortega or Chandler? So, Casey,
that's for you, bud.
Thank you for super chatting. I made some promises about being professional on this broadcast, and I'll just say that Brian Ortega is, I think, the most frustrating fighter in MMA. Michael Chandler is, I just don't really like him, but I understand him. I don't understand how Brian Ortega operates as a fighter, because he has a lot of tools that should make him a champion. Like, he has such a dynamic and exciting offense that is unique to him and that people are not prepared for. And he is just insanely durable. I mean, this dude can take a beating. Homer Simpson is not a reliable pattern to be in MMA. Historically, there has never really been like a championship level fighter who simply could not defend themselves but for having a granite chin. They also had defense and didn't just run headlong into every bit of offense from their opposition. That's not how Brian Ortega works. And the two times he's fought dudes who haven't sort of folded to the game he offers back on his own offense, he has gotten just bludgeoned. Like, Volk and Max absolutely brutalized him in a hard way. But everybody else has sort of fallen into the game, and I'll never understand it. I will, because he loses every fight until he wins them, and I just can't wrap my head around it. So that's where I'm at with him, boys.
So not to put words in your mouth, Jed, but Chandler then.
Yes.
Answer the question. Answer the question.
Who will get? Will Brian Ortega fight for the title before Michael Chandler fights Conor McGregor?
Yes, because Michael Chandler is never fighting Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's never. I don't think Conor's fighting again.
Will Renan Ferreira fight Francis Ngannou before Michael Chandler fights Conor McGregor?
Again, yes. Because for what Jed just said.
Yeah.
I truly don't think Conor's coming back.
Will pigs fly before Chandler?
Thank you, Casey. Casey Carpenter, not Casey Lyden. It was super chatting with you, Casey. But thank you also, Casey.
This is a trilogy of super chats. It's a train of thought, so we're going to go through them kind of fast from Milan Lasica.
Milan Lasica. Can we talk about the fact PFL won Ferreira versus Ngannou? Okay,
hold on.
PFL 1 is an interesting thought. Pay for super chat, they'll ignore you. It's lit.
Sounds like a party.
And then?
Oh, no, my bad. I didn't know how that works. Sorry, boys. Thought you were ignoring me.
Dude, I'm pretty sure people were doing the same thing at the post show that I had to run. People were like, "I'm giving you $1. Bring up my question." I'm like, "Bro, you know how this works." I'm waiting till the end.
Look, it's a new feature. We're learning as we go here. Milan, that's okay.
Will we answer Milan's question before Michael Chandler fights Conor?
Thank you, Milan.
We will.
So what was it, back to his first
Yeah, the
question.
first one is
So funny.
Yes.
did PFL win? I mean, Ferreira won, and they
Yeah.
lost all the rest of them. So because that was an interesting narrative if you were on MMA Twitter of they were planting flags at the top of the stage for like who won, and it was just like all Bellator flags going down
It's
the
so
line.
lame.
It was super lame, and it was also like a pretty bad visual for this, except for it's not
Yeah.
because it's own Bellator, so it kind of is whatever. But AK, I think maybe you said this. Somebody said this, so I'm sorry if it wasn't you. By the rule of last shot wins, they won because El Problema won, so he had the
That's
ball
true.
last to win.
Fair point. One pride wolf.
Nate Diaz beat Leon Edwards. Same thing.
Oh yeah.
I
We
mean,
all know that. We all know
absolutely.
that. Rocked him.
Or
Rocked
what
him.
did when Brad Katona won tough? He was obviously on Michael Chandler's team for like most of the season, right? AK.
Yeah, he
And
was.
then Mike-
No. I think after like the first fight or something, he went over. It was
well,
weird.
like regardless, like
Yeah, I know you mean.
everyone, like pretty much Connor lost every fight except
Yes,
for like
correct.
Brad, and he wasn't on his team. And then Connor tweets like, "Team McGregor wins tough. It's official," and then just signs off. I was like, I mean, not
You
wrong,
gotta
but
respect
you're
the
right.
hustle.
Walk off. Drop the mic.
Here's what I will say about Ferreira and Ngannou. Again, I would way rather it be Vadim Nemkov, who looked awesome at heavyweight. Granted, it's Bruno Cappelloso, but still.
That squeeze. Oh my god.
Ferreira and Ngannou would last about 90 seconds, and it would be really fun and super violent. So if that is what we end up getting, that still is pretty cool, even if maybe it's not optimal.
They got to do Ngannou Nemkov, and then the co-main event. Nemkov's coach Fedor can fight Francis's coach Mike Tyson. And
So Mike Tyson,
yeah. I'm here for the circuits.
Oh, man.
Oh, Mike Tyson's quote about
Roaches?
I just like to watch people fight. I'll watch anything fight. I'll watch roaches fight. It's like, okay, Mike, good one. It's fun stuff. PFL had a lot of
Did
good
you guys
ones.
think? Did you guys think Chael was very good?
Chael was
today?
awful.
I did not.
I
I didn't think Chael.
I
I thought Chael was allowed his element.
I thought Chael was bad, but he was better than everyone else in the broadcast booth for them. He also did the thing that Dana used to do a lot, where he yelled into a microphone as if the microphone doesn't already amplify his voice. So that was a tough scene. The broadcast was tough in a lot of respects. They were very keen on selling their product in a way that was off-putting. It was tough, but
and honestly, it made me appreciate. I know other people have issues of, say, Dominic Cruz or whatever, but I thought tonight's commentary for the Mexico card was really well done. Was it Fitzgerald? It's Fitzgerald tonight, right?
Yeah, Fitzgerald is very good.
It was Fitzgerald.
Fitz is always really good.
Yeah, Fitz, Felder, and Dom. I thought they did a great job tonight. That's all. So, and I think it made me appreciate them a little more after watching PFL. So
I'm a fairly big Dominic Cruz hater. I will say that he was mostly good tonight. He had a couple of brain farts when he was couldn't do the math on Denver being Denver versus Mexico City elevation. And then he also just boldly was out there claiming that Brandon Moreno is the man who built the flyweight division because he forgot that Demetrius Johnson existed. I guess I'm unclear. It's like, yeah, Brandon Moreno. It's the guy, the reason this division is around.
Yeah.
The guy they released because UFC released.
The thing that bugged me with Chael is he would just pick up on these like really obscure things that we just didn't need to talk about, but he just was trying to fill time. He's like, oh, they're complaining about blows to the back of the head. And then like 36 seconds, he goes, ignore what I just said. They're not doing that.
Yeah. I will say in his very slight defense, Sean O'Connell is nominally the play-by-play dude, and he just didn't speak for big portions when like
100%.
Normally a play-by-play guy would be filling air. He was just like watching the fight, I guess. There were like odd empty space. It was not a seamless broadcast in that respect. And I mean, you got Chael moving into that booth, so it's sort of new, but I hope they iterate on that moving forward. I think there's room to grow.
And I'll give UFC a little benefit too for their announcers. They have a lot more reps. They have fights every
They have a ton of
freaking
reps.
week.
Yeah.
They have so many reps, and that
And
obviously
Felder and
pays
Fitz
dividends.
are terrific.
Yeah.
Felder and Fitz are terrific, and they have a pattern because they work together all the time. And
Also-
like you said, thought Dominic Cruz was better than usual this week.
And
Also,
I do appreciate that when they thought there was, I forgot what fight it was, but they thought there was a tap, and Dom pointed out, no, that's the wrong guy or something. What was that? They thought his opponent was tapping. It was like, no, that's the guy that actually was putting. I don't know. It was funny.
And I just want to say, AIM661 in the comments saying Grasso and Ponzinibbio on the Spanish broadcast. Apparently not too bad either. So there you go.
Awesome.
Anyone
Didn't get to hear that, but that's cool. And
Ponzinibbio has been doing it. He's the best they got in terms of Cheeto does it, Moreno does it, but I think Santiago is so good at the commentary for the Spanish team.
Cool. All right. We have a few more super chats, so let's power through these.
Woo. Steven, love your work, boys from Australia. Stadium events. What's the problem? We do it all the time. Also, Jose, why doesn't your hair move?
That's two questions.
It's just, I mean, I'm assuming the hair doesn't move because you just have a naturally full head of hair and good genes. So, I mean, feel free to expound if
Thanks
it's more
for the
than
genes,
Mom. So I was listening to the preview show today prior to things kicking off, and the talk, somehow we started talking about Ilia Topuria. Started talking about Ilia Topuria and going with Yair to Spain in a stadium, and now that's obviously never going to happen. But I do think that you kind of outlined, certainly my thoughts on the matter were pretty well elucidated by New York Rick in that one, and I think you guys handled it well, so I'd encourage you to go back and listen. But basically, there's not a real good reason why they haven't happened other than you need a particular brand of star to do it. You need somebody who can sell out 40, 50, 70,000 seat arenas like that, and they don't have that many of them. But I also think the UFC is just not interested in doing that for whatever reasons, because Conor McGregor has never headlined a stadium show, and
Go ahead, Casey.
I'm going to suggest something, and Dana I thought he kind of hinted at this last week when he was talking about how Conor or fighters don't want to fight when they're rich. I think it goes for the UFC too. The UFC, when you want to put a stadium show on, that takes a lot of effort. It just takes a lot of effort because you have to rearrange the whole stadium, the seating, everything, the lighting, all the extra TVs you need, the TVs monitors you need. That's why the UFC is at the apex every freaking week, because it is easy and they make money. And a stadium show takes effort. And I'm just gonna say the UFC is kind of lazy right now, as far as that kind of stuff.
I think in the next 18 months we're going to get a stadium show. I'm pretty confident. I think this new TKO era, I think they're going to do it. The WWE just sold AK, what was that? They just did the Perth Stadium. That was 80,000 people or something. And the UFC fighters were there, and like Tai Tuivasa was on the broadcast and everything, doing shoeys with Grayson, whatever his name is. I think this TKO group is just a totally different era.
Jose, you make a very good point, because these guys do stadium shows all the freaking time with SummerSlam, WrestleMania. Yeah. Bring that production crew over to the UFC. Instead of the ring, put an octagon in there. It's the same thing. So I hope.
And you don't need a stage either for
you don't need a stage.
Back on cost. Because I appreciate the stage with the WWE. I don't really care for the stage in MMA. I like them entering through for Pride, it was different because that was Pride and that was just a beautiful era. But I don't really care about the Bellator or the PFL ramps and entrances. But yeah, I agree. I think what we were saying with the UFC has great production. WWE blows every single sport out of the water.
Yeah,
and WWE is getting better too. With the who was they changed? Who was the guy, the director that left WWE? You know what I'm talking about. But they got kind of a new director, and the production has gotten even better. So they're right there. They're across the hall. Those guys that can do stadium shows. So I hope I'm excited for the future of big shows for the UFC. I think
Ilya at the Bernabeu. I mean, it's going to be insane.
Yeah.
It's just what a moment that's going to be for the UFC and for MMA. Honestly, if they pull that off, holy freaking crap!
I think that's a great point about the WWE thing, and I hope so, because that would be
They're about
an
to do
awesome thing.
WrestleMania in the where the Eagles play. Like there's going to be like 80 to 90,000 people there. And this is not anything new. Like WrestleMania 2 was allegedly 90,000 people at the Superdome. Obviously, that number was incorrect, but still, the fact that you could say 90,000, look at that and be like, yeah, that looks like 90,000 people. Like they've been doing this.
Yeah. Cool.
That's a great point. Thanks, Steven. Super chatting with you.
Hey, Milan again.
Milan's back. No, but PFL Henan versus Ngannou is better than Ortega versus Ilya. Also, Jed, you're the real BTL champ. I am. I won this past week, so I am real making me pay for 60 or.
Did you beat
characters?
I beat Brian characters. I beat Brian Campbell this week. So yeah. Yes, is Hernan Ferreira versus Ngannou better than Ortega Ilya? I think the answer has to be no, because it's heavyweights.
In terms of like interest, but I think it's like people are interested in Francis. They're not interested in Hernan Ferreira versus. Like people are going to be hyped, especially if Francis beats Anthony Joshua, and then in this fictional world he still fights MMA. That is massive. Francis versus anyone.
Yeah,
if beats Anthony Joshua and then comes back to the smart page to knock out Hernan Ferreira in 43 seconds.
Yeah, but yeah, and Ngannou actually fighting for the PFL obviously means more to the PFL than Ilya's next title defense, unless it's at the Bernabeu, and that's a whole other story. That actually is definitely been way bigger than any Ngannou MMA fight besides maybe John Jones. But yeah, Hernan and Ngannou, huge fight. If Ortega and Ilya just happens at like in Las Vegas, still a huge fight. Don't get me wrong, but PFL really needs to say, we signed Ngannou and we got him to fight at least once inside the smart cage, because if it doesn't happen, it's not going to kill them or anything, but it's a joke. It'll pretty much be a joke and a meme until the end of time, and one that they'll never be able to outrun. So it's really important that fight happens, regardless of opponent.
It would be very tough for them. It might kill them. It would be pretty tough for them.
No.
Thanks again, Milan. Derek Andrus. Did Ortega fumble that post-fight interview by not calling for a title shot? It's an interesting question. AK, what are you? I mean, this is usually where my is strong. So,
yeah, I know. I don't think so.
He's your best friend. Stand in for him.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm all for people doing the thing. That's what Mike would have wanted Ortega to do. Ortega should have done the thing. He should have called for a title fight. But I don't know if there's anything that Ortega honestly could have said to hurt or help his chances. I think we laid it out pretty clearly. Volkanovski is their first choice. It depends when Volkanovski, because it's easy to market. They love doing immediate rematches. He deserves one. Volkanovski is their first choice. He's probably already ahead of Mosar. If we're being honest of what they think of him, what they think of Mosar, he's probably already ahead of Mosar. So there's nothing, if he calls for it, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't make a difference. This was his first win in almost over 3 years. His first fight in 18 months. He had a lot going on in his mind besides that. Could he have done better business? Sure. I don't think he fumbled the post-fight interview at all. It's not going to make a difference. If they can get Volk, it's going to be Volk. If they can't get Volk, it'll be him.
He didn't pull a Dariush and say, I'll fight 15 more times.
Yeah.
He wanted to know whatever Dariush said one time.
Also, he could do it.
When Dariush said, find Jesus in a stadium filled with Muslims.
Oh, yeah, that was
a lot.
That was, man. Ooh, Benny D. That was tough. And it doesn't matter because Brian Ortega defies logic. So he probably, by not calling for a title fight, probably got himself closer. Because that's just how his career works.
Brian's also never been that guy. Like, he's never cut a mean promo. Like, his fights are just fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been out of character.
Dude.
Yeah.
And he's got two title opportunities. He's got 2 title opportunities, so he's doing something right. He's already fought.
Yeah, you're right.
And he was like, did you guys notice he asked Mark Goddard not to raise his hand?
No one talked about that. That was interesting.
I did not notice that.
I thought that was like he's all about respect. He's all about God, and he talks about like he hurt his ankle, but he knew. I'm like, hey man, all power to you. If that's what you want, that's all power to you. So it just seems like not a different Brian Ortega, but his priorities are now a little different. Like he still wants to fight and win.
Plus, he's redefining our entire understanding of ornithology. So, it's great.
More
We
importantly,
now know so much more about eagles and the magical powers they have of rebirth.
facts, dog.
This is one of the best pre-fight interviews I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Ben, what is PFL supposed to do with Shields? She didn't look great today. All right, let's talk. Let's do the Clarissa Shields thing. I kind of figured someone would ask the question. I have a pretty clear stance on Clarissa Shields, and it's this. I tweeted out, this fight was very tough to watch. I have an immense amount of respect for Clarissa Shields, the athlete. I have an immense amount of respect for her kind of challenging herself by stepping into MMA. It is very clear to me that she has no real aptitude for this sport. And if she wants to continue doing it because this is a passion of hers, then by all means, but she's not going anywhere significant. And so if the PFL is keeping her around under the hope that something like that will happen, that's a bad plan. And we should all, anyone who is expecting her to be like, ooh, her versus Pacheco or her versus Cyborg, like, no, those will never happen. But she's a hell of an athlete, and I'm glad she is doing something that she enjoys.
I think transitioning from being a full-time boxer to MMA is incredibly difficult. Has anyone successfully really done it? I know kickboxers
Holly.
have, but
Holly.
Holly Holm.
Yeah,
Holly
Holly's one they always bring up.
Holly was a
Holly left
kickboxer.
boxing,
Holly was
I
a
guess.
kickboxer. Holly was a kickboxer that did boxing. She was a kickboxer. That's important.
And
Clarissa
she had left
Shields was never a
boxing to go to
kickboxer.
MMA.
Yeah. Boxing is just really incredibly difficult to transition to MMA without and skipping the whole kickboxing part because you kind of go, that kind of transition. I hope she continues, but she didn't train with Jackson's this camp, right?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty confident she didn't because, yeah. And I don't know, this whole Cyborg, Clarissa Shields kind of smack talk I'm hearing too. That's weird, but
Cyborg's been taking a lot of L's lately. It was odd. She came out immediately and was like mocking Clarissa Shields, which is just bad form.
Well, they've been
she figures-
beefing. They've been beefing before that. I don't know, which doesn't make
Yeah.
it better. I'm just saying it wasn't out of nowhere.
It's
Like
weird to mock her like for
Yes.
any of the things you're mocking her for.
And again,
A lot of-
we should keep in mind it is not always Cyborg.
Yeah.
Well,
It is more often than not. We say
very
it's
fair
not
point.
Cyborg who was
Wait.
making these comments. But
I want to
yes.
correct myself real quick. Amanda Serrano has actually been successful in MMA
Yeah.
and incredibly
Yeah.
successful
What did she
in
like?
boxing.
Sure,
Is it
sure.
2-0, something like that?
Yeah, she's like 2-0 and
Yeah.
actually look good.
She has certainly looked better than Clarissa Shields has.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
but-
not saying she's she's going to be a
Yeah.
world beater, but that's all.
But-
I
But
forgot
this
there is
question,
one.
the question is, what is PFL supposed to do with her? Listen, they didn't. It's not like they put her on the main card and pushed her as like one of the. The fight kind of flew under the radar, and I know that sounds stupid. Then it's like, well, why even have Clarissa Shields in the first place? But I think they're trying to find that right balance between saying, hey, look, we have Clarissa Shields. You know her from the world of boxing. She has some fame there. Watch our card, and then also not going all the way because they did have her on a main card before, and it didn't necessarily go so great. So they're okay. We want you to know she's fighting. She fights for us, but we're not telling you she's this huge deal and she's gonna be a 1-hour champion. So what do you do with her is when she wants to fight in MMA, you book her an MMA fight. If she wants to stay with box, if she says, hey, sorry, I'm boxing in 2024, rest of 2024, I'm not fighting in MMA this year, you just suck it up. They haven't put like all these eggs in the Clarissa Shields basket. They've done good job publicizing that they've signed her, but it's not like if the Clarissa Shields experiment fails, it's like, oh no, what is PFL going to do? It's like, oh, it's okay. They just had her and they gave her a shot and it did or it didn't work out, right? She's 2-1. She hasn't been amazing in any of her fights, and that's okay. So it's really up to her. It's really not about what will PFL do. It's like, is she available? And if she is, put her on. If she's not, oh well, she boxes.
So there are two other things to note here. One, it is at least like she is now one half of the first women's fight that's happened in Saudi Arabia. So that's, cool trivia bit for her. Huzzah. Second, I'm fine with that. It's PFL. They get to choose what to do, but Clarissa Shields is not free and they are, I assume, spending a fair amount of money to keep her around, with minimal upside of return there. So it will be interesting to see what they do with her moving forward. I assume that you are right, AK, though. This is kind of what we'll have for as long as the PFL is solvent, which is anyone's guess how long that will continue.
Just put
Thanks,
Clarissa
Ben.
Shields, yeah, but Clarissa Shields against another boxer trying MMA. Just have,
Sure.
So it's just
Amanda Serrano, do it.
just
I
Amanda
know,
Serrano.
I know that
think-
there's like a fairly large weight discrepancy. It's
Considerable,
fine.
yeah.
Amanda Serrano is a
think-
better grappler than Clara
Yeah, I
Shields.
still like
is.
Serrano's chances, frankly.
I also just
Yeah.
think like Clarissa Shields has said this, like she's the gap between her and the second best boxer in her weight class is so massive
Sal
that she's
Lynch.
like, I could take 3 years off, only do MMA, go back to boxing, and still be number one. And I believe that. Like I would be interested if she just spent like 2 years just training with Greg Jackson, and
Yeah.
not taking fights and just getting better.
Cool. All right. Got a couple more.
Jason Hagholm. Sorry if I got that wrong.
A
Jason.
regular. By the way, this is his 10th super chat, guys. Casey, do we have
How
reggaeton
do you
air
know that?
horns, or it says it in our
Does it
super chat
tell
on,
you?
on YouTube? There we go.
Oh.
Thank you, Jason. Yes.
Oh.
Thanks, Jason.
Jason, PFL felt like the biggest loser in their own promotion. Really showed the co-leader is more RC Cola instead of Pepsi. Bellator fighters help PFL a lot.
This is I was having this conversation with someone the other day. This is inherently the problem, and when I say problem, it's not a negative. This is just the issue when you have leagues and tournaments, because everyone can have a weird day, and the best fighter or the biggest draw doesn't win the tournament. Like the best, like Jed, who had the most wins in baseball last year.
Braves.
Who was the best player in baseball not named Shohei Ohtani last year?
I have no idea.
Ronald Acuna, 40-70.
Oh yeah,
They couldn't even get out of the
year.
first round. They couldn't get out of the first round. Like it happens. Like the best doesn't always make it to the finals, and that is a double-edged sword. The PFL, that's fun in MMA because you actually do get some sort of meritocracy. You can't argue with the tournament, but then at the end, if this was Verdum with the title, like if he had actually entered the tournament and won, then it would be like, oh, Verdum, former UFC champion, has wins over Fedor and Big Nog and all these other, and Cain Velasquez. Now could he get one over Francis? Like it just, sometimes it doesn't work out. Brandon Ferreira won a tournament and then knocked out Ryan Bader. You can't argue with it. He's just not the biggest name.
And also, not the best heavyweight in PFL. I will say that also we all knew this, right? Like it's PFL is the joke was being made. PFL is the co-leader in their own promotion with Bellator. That's a great joke. I'm here for it, but yeah, I thought everyone knew the score when PFL bought Bellator. They weren't buying Bellator to put on big. They were buying Bellator because their roster is bad, or at least really that it had some spots in it, but it is really, really deficient from the top names, in part because of how they've done their recruiting, and in part because the way that their organization is structured is just very, very different. Like the league plus tournament thing prioritizes different skill sets than like regular quote unquote MMA does. And also Bellator has, for all its failings, was a phenomenally successful developmental program. They put a ton of time and resources into scouting talent, into developing talent, into acquiring early talent, into bringing in a bunch of wrestlers and kind of feeding them up. And that's how you get guys like AJ McKee and Aaron Pico. They don't fall off trees. That was a concentrated effort from Bellator over years and years. That was the allure to purchasing them. And like this, so yeah, it was kind of a dumb gimmick to do PFL versus Bellator because we all knew how that would go, but it's also a funnish gimmick, and it doesn't matter because PFL owns all the Bellator fighters. So they are all PFL fighters, even if they're wearing different shorts.
Yeah,
it's like when Nas and Jay-Z were beefing, and everyone is like, well, Nas very clearly won all of the actual rapping, but then Jay-Z signed him to his record label. So I was like, who actually won?
Yes.
And for the record, I don't agree that Nas unequivocally won that beef, but that's a whole other discussion.
Hey.
That's a whole other discussion.
Big Takeover fan? Get that.
I'm a big taker. It's just Ether is more fun to say. Ether is an amazing song and also just more fun to say. You can't take over someone.
Hot take, Nas is wildly overrated.
Whoa, that's a whole
whoa.
No. All right.
He's from the South.
Illmatic rocks. and he's got some other good songs. But yeah, Steve Dawson.
Nas has the biggest gap between excellent and bad songs. In
Oh, sure.
all of
Agreed.
his songs.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
That
It's terrible.
that is
terrible
very
song.
true.
When he peaks,
Steve-
no one's better, but he has some stinkers. Anyway,
Kind of Ryan Bader.
Dawson.
Like Ryan Bader. When he's good,
He's
he's
the
good. When
Ryan
he's bad,
Bader
he's
of
very
the
bad.
Nas the Ryan Bader of everybody.
When I think of Ryan
Holy
Bader, I
shit.
think of Nas, and vice versa.
Guys, it's very late.
I mean, that's a really good comp.
Is it though?
It is. It is because when Bader falls flat, man,
It is
it
bad.
is spectacular. The first punch he got, he looked terrified. And the first punch he got hit, he just rolled over and was like, "Nope, don't want to do this, not at all." Which I don't blame him. I don't want to get hit by Renan Ferreira either. But still, man, like it was tough. Steven Dawson, what do you think the future is for PFL after this event? The audience seemed disinterested quite often and seemed a bit lackluster. I've been to a bunch of PFL shows at this point in time. I will say that the audiences sort of kind of have that vibe just in general. I have no idea what the Saudi audience like was in person, but it did not translate through the camera at all. And I think kind of what either Jose or Casey, whichever one of you said that, just felt like some rich dudes with their friends having their own private event. I think there's real possibility that is sort of what happened. And so the audience is tough. I also think PFL doesn't care at all because Saudi paid them a whole lot of money to be there ostensibly. And that's the thing that matters more to them. And so my answer for this would just be, they're going to keep moving forward. They already started talking about kind of where they're going next. They announced an event that I can't remember where it's at, but sort of their international start moving forward. They're talking about Pacheco versus Cyborg to headline their next pay-per-view sometime this summer. They'll just kind of keep doing this stuff, and hopefully we'll get Patricio Pitbull versus Aaron Pico and some stuff like that. But what do you guys think?
What is the future for PFL? It's hard because this event wasn't what it was supposed to be, right? Conceptually, it was great. This was what we were hoping for when they first acquired Bellator, right? We were like, oh, cool. They definitely have to do a champion versus champion show. And that's going to really, it's not going to make them the co-leader, but it's going to raise their prestige some. And it's going to give a lot of fighters, some much needed exposure. And we just unfortunately didn't get that. This event should have had Pitbull on it, and things just didn't work out. This event should have had Magomed Karamov. I think I would have loved to have him on this card. Didn't work out. It just wasn't what we were hoping for. The concept got muddled too with turning to 3-round fights, which by the way was a good idea when they had so many world title fights. I was like, okay, good, because however many 5-rounders can just be dreary to watch. So conceptually, it was a good idea, and it's hard to say where they're going to go from because it's kind of an incomplete. It's kind of they didn't get what they expected. If they can get that Renan and Ngannou fight, then again, I mean, the sky's the limit, right? Then the future is so bright. But I just see a lot of uncertainty right now, so I could not tell you what the future is. Again, because this event gets kind of an incomplete grade. And it wasn't a bad event at all, just as far as what it means for the merger.
Like I said, this event was a ground rule double. Not a home run. Definitely not a home run. Not a strikeout.
Yeah.
Just,
They got on base.
Got on base. Yeah. Got on base. Yeah. Cody Watson.
Cody Watson just got here. Herb Dean was infuriating. So I assume he's speaking about the main event where Herb Dean, particularly down the stretch, was extremely quick on the trigger to break up Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval. Certainly in that 5th round, made one really quick separation as they were clinching and kind of almost immediately threatened to do it the next time they clinched. I actually just a little bit on Herb's side this time. That felt in a vacuum, it's bad to move it that quickly. It really felt to me in the moment like Brandon Moreno was absolutely just trying to stall out for time. Still didn't give him a ton of time to really any time to work, but I was fine. Herb's had a lot worse failings than that, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, you all agree? I was like, surely one of you would disagree.
No, I saw a lot of people somewhat complimenting Herb for his his officiating, if only because again it kind of we didn't want to see Moreno try and stall and the fight, but did he do it by the book tonight? I don't know. Did he do a good job kind of giving the people what they want? Yeah, maybe.
That's the thing. He may not have fulfilled like the letter of the law, but he kind of did the spirit of it in a good way. And like, we're all human beings, and realistically, he's gonna let Brandon Moreno like pretty blatantly try to stall if it's the third round. But in a fight that he has to be aware is really close with the fight on the line, just letting one dude like just hold without really making efforts to advance I think he got the spirit of this one right.
All right.
CJE Train, thoughts on the split decision for Dos Santos versus Altamirano?
Real
That
bad.
was the second fight in the card. If you
Real
want
bad.
refresh your memory, the two flyweights.
Real bad.
It was bad.
I will not pretend to have watched this fight super closely.
This set the table for all the other whack. Like, as soon as this happened, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those nights. And it sure was.
Four splitties on the card.
We don't normally do Twitter reacts for second fight of the night, and yet we did one for this.
Oh, did we?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
All
it was
right.
just
Love that
bad
energy.
Real bad.
Just
real
bad
bad.
decision. Yeah. Oh.
Jason, how does PFL not have a bantamweight division?
Yeah.
They just
another
bought
name
one.
I forgot.
They
Patchy
do.
Mix again. Patchy Mix should have been on this card somewhere, right? If you're going to do he's the best fighter in Bellator.
Because they want to do the dang Bellator PFL, and there's no PFL bantamweight, so
no. But
they shouldn't have him there. Yeah, I don't know.
They should have just found a bantamweight opponent for him to fight. I don't know. Get someone from Ryzen. Was there not some Ryzen bantamweight that could have brought over to fight Patchy?
Or just get someone from Bellator that. Aaron Pico fought Henry Corrales. I know that wasn't the plan, but he fought a Bellator dude. Just get a Bellator guy to fight. I will also say that it's really dumb, but it's quite infuriating to me because 2 years ago, I asked Ray Sefo at a PFL event, I was like, are you guys going to open up weight classes, and are you going to open up bantamweight, which is widely considered one of the two best divisions in the sport? And he was like, yes, we're looking at it. And that was in 2022, and it's now 2024, and we're still – they bought one but don't have one. It's weird. So annoying, but they're getting one.
I bet if you ask him now, he'll tell you, yeah, I looked at it. Bantamweight's pretty great. He's like, I've been looking at it in the UFC. It's weird. Looking at it
because
it's a great division.
I love Ray Sefo, but you're going to get more information out of Scott Coker than you are Ray Sefo.
Yeah,
I remember PFL used to be World Series of Fighting. World Series of Fighting created Marlon Moraes, who came this close to, greatness in the UFC. So I don't know. It's weird, but they kind of do have one now. They bought one. They just haven't. They haven't
deployed it.
Yeah.
Interesting. We're getting a ton of PFL super chats. Not what I thought the combo was going to be about today.
And yet we're talking about it not being a home run. It's on the MMA Fighting post show. 3 a.m.
It's a pretty good one.
Ground Road double when they just stole third. They stole third. They're on third.
I will say it also did surprisingly well for us from a traffic standpoint.
It's like what I was talking with Sean about. It's one of those cards that people aren't going to want to pay for, but they're going to
hear about that.
Yeah. It is I don't know if you've looked at it. It's kind of beating the hell out of the UFC Mexico City traffic, which I am stunned by. Yes. Yeah. I am stunned by that, but that is true.
All right. Well.
It happens.
Henan Mania. It's real.
I mean, we legitimately might have to say this is at least a triple at this point.
Okay, I was wrong. Yeah. Got ground road double and then a balk got him to third.
Stretch the two triple.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We got a quick super chat just came in right now. $10 from Steven.
Woo! Steven. Hey, AK, do you use moisturize? Love it. Need to know Justin versus Max predictions. If you've already said them, I'd like to apologize for my dumbass. Never apologize for being you, Steven. AK, what's your opinion on moisturizers and or skincare products?
No, I have to. My lovely girlfriend, God bless her, before I met her, I actually didn't use moisturize that much. I'm like, whatever. My dry ass face is fine. But I think if you look at some of our broadcasts, if you look at like now to compare to a broadcast, whatever, like 3 years ago, you'll be like, wow, it's like night and day. I can really see just how ugly this man is now. It was hard to tell before, but now I can tell. No, yeah, I don't know. I'm getting older. I got to moisturize. My skin gets dry, so I do, and I'm proud of it. I've got some coconut thing on my face tonight. But yeah, and I put it on a while ago though, so you know what? It's probably not even showing. But yeah, there you go. Look, Casey's you gotta moisturize, guys. Good for you.
You gotta moisturize, guys.
Moisturize your face, moisturize your hands.
Yeah.
You know, your elbows. Get those elbows.
I moisturize twice a day, mostly because my wonderful wife reminds me to, because I shower all the time because I'm all sweaty. I gotta wipe off all the bacteria and staph off me, and then I moisturize and keep.
Women are smart, man.
This fresh, keep this. Gotta stay young.
Women are smart.
Run to MMA for skincare tips.
Yeah.
That's what I say about MMA fighting all the time.
I'm picking Justin.
Yeah,
there's 2 questions in here, guys. 2 questions.
It is. I think I'm picking Justin. I think Max does have a really good shot, but I don't. If Max's chin is still legend, like God tier, which we have no real reason to think it won't be God tier, though he did kind of get buzzed by Zombie for a moment. Then he's got a real good chance. But I'm just gonna pick Justin Gaethje because the man he just breaks souls, and Max Holloway is smaller than him.
Picking Justin Gaethje, man, but if Max can pull it off, it would for him to do that. You know how crazy exciting this fight will be for Max to pull it off, like in a Max Holloway type way. It would have to be almost like, I feel like, a fight of the year for Max to pull this off. Like, it can't be a boring. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well,
like
it's also Justin Gaethje's in it, so it has a like 80% chance of being fight of the year because he has been fight of the year like every year.
Like, if Justin wins, I feel like it could be one-way traffic, but if Max wins, it could be like fight of the year. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's gonna rule. I wish it wasn't happening now. Give me Max versus Taporia. Give me that.
The timing. Yeah, the timing's odd. But yeah. And for our final question, it's a simple one.
From Anomaly, who were your biggest standout fighters today? That's right, boys and girls. Today, you got a lot of options.
All right.
I'll give you
3.
Whoever you're feeling.
Who's going first?
AK's ready.
I'll pick 3, and I won't just go like Roy for the big winner. But I gotta say Orttega. I gotta say Manuel Torres, and there's a lot of guys you could pick from the PFL Bellator card. But shout-outs to Impa. Really shout-outs to Impa, because I know the storyline coming out of the Eblin fight is going to be, Eblin was not as good as people thought he was. Fine, whatever. Maybe his performance was disappointing, but I think it was disappointing because Impa presented just a stiff challenge. And I know everyone just thinks of the Joaquin Buckley highlight reel spin kick of Impa, but guys, like, Impa hasn't been in MMA that long. So yeah, early in his career, guess what? He's gonna end up in the wrong end of a highlight. And I think just making the UFC so quickly inflated their expectations for him. He's clearly a talented guy. He was very well suited to the PFL format. And yeah, he fell short against Eblin. And yeah, if it was a 5-round fight, 1, maybe Eblin takes it more seriously. 2, maybe the extra rounds just completely expose him, but I don't know. But within the parameters of this fight, he did great. So I even though he didn't win, there's a lot of great winners from the PFL cards you could pick. I think Impa kind of, like, in a weird way, raised his stock the most. You can make the case for Henan, but again, that's only if you believe that the Ngannou fight's happening.
Also, Impa's about to go to Harvard, so you know.
Man, what a guy! What a talented guy!
Doing big things. Man, I'll give you mine unless Jose's ready.
I'll probably go with Brian Henan, because anytime you win in 21 seconds is impressive. And AJ McKee looks pretty unbelievable. Like, Clay I don't think he broke a sweat. So those are probably my big 3.
And before we go to Jed, I'm going to go Brian Ortega, Zell Huber, Hani Barcelos, because I love that man. I love watching him fight. And AJ McKee, because he rules. And I want to say Aaron Pico, but it wasn't really. Aaron Pico too, because he did what he was supposed
Henry
to do.
Krause, yeah, it was just a bummer. Henry Krause basically just got off the couch.
Yeah,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
Aaron Pico did what he's supposed to do and looked great. So I'm gonna say those are my standout performers. And
I'll close shop and then we can get out of here, boys. It's 3 a.m. my time. I refuse to say Brian Ortega. I just don't not gonna do it. Never make me. Zellhuber, because he's 24 years old and this was I've been feeling this way, but I left that fight feeling like, oh, he's developing really well. Like this is not a guy who is an interesting prospect. This is a guy who is going to be a top 15, 20 lightweight and maybe going to be like a title challenger one day. Like that's kind of where his ceiling is. So Zellhuber from the UFC, PFL Bellator, AJ McKee and Aaron Pico. AJ McKee, I think he's just had such a weird career. I think we're kind of underrating him collectively, but his one loss is to Pitbull in a competitive fight. And because he's been sort of bouncing around, like he's been fighting at lightweight, but not like the best lightweights. It's easy to sort of just forget that. Oh, actually, this dude was probably one of the best fighters just in the world, regardless of weight class. And Aaron Pico, his last 2-3 performances, he's here. He's the prince who was promised. The guy we all thought he got here. He is a grown ass man in the cage now, and like could legitimately end up being the best. Maybe not the best featherweight, but he's freaking same age as Ilya Topuria. Like that's a thing that is very out there. So those two, and then also because I just want to give it a shout out. There's a man by the name of Muslim Tashiv over in KSW. They had a no holds barred fight, which basically was Pride Rules MMA, and he
Yeah.
soccer kicked and stomped Conrad Rosinski, and it was dope. It was super fun. The highlights up on MMAfighting.com because soccer kicks and stomps rule. The rest of the KSW card was fun, but that was the highlight for me. And that's it, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. We went almost 2 full hours on this mega weekend event of stuff, which I didn't realize would happen, but got fun fights. Things happened, and now we're on to the next one. That's right. Next week, we'll be coming at you same time, same place with Gaethje versus Rosenstrike. What a wonderful Apex card. That's Alexander K. Lee. That's José Youngs. That's E. Casey Leiden. I'm Jed Meshew. Thanks so much. We love you all. Good night, everybody.